And I'd like to just thank Mayor and his administration for putting together the community meetings last week in such a short time frame and going out to every district community. I thank you guys for coming to 3 of my districts or communities in my district, and I am very interested to hear from you folks what the sense of all these meetings, what the outcome was, because I have a sense of what my communities felt about this. So if you could share that first, and then I'll yield.
First of all, Deanna Sacco, Director of Finance. First of all, I want to thank each of the council members too, because you're very helpful in getting the meetings all set up in the places and everything. And so we were very happy to, hear people's concerns. And there definitely were concerns, but there were also a lot of people in favor. I mean, each district was a little bit different. And so some people are angry at government in general. I mean, I heard a lot of complaints about federal, state, and county levels. So, unfortunately, we can't fix all of those things, but we can try and get the word out. And the governor's liaison was at least one of those meetings, so to get the word back to the state. But definitely some people don't want new taxes, but on the other hand, there's a lot of people who actually want improved roads and an improved bus system. That they rely on that bus system to get to and from work every day. So I think it was actually a few more people in favor than against based on the comments. But that was kind of just my impression. But definitely they want to see a plan. And we did bring a plan today. But I think the mayor might be in Hilo, and he might also have comments.
Yes, he is. And I was just going to ask you if I could ask the mayor to. Mayor Kim?
Oh, thank you very much. I realize last minute of me being here. I apologize for that. First of all, as I've said to all of the meetings, I realize a very, very difficult position I put the council people in, and I know it is very difficult. I was very impressed with the statements and the manner in which the statement was delivered by the gentleman from Kona in regards to the Board of Realtors. I realize the frustration with us in regards to expenditure. Of this, I will say, the very, very difficulty of coming to the county council to say to raise taxes again. Please understand, I do know the difficult position I put you in because of what we were asking. I will say this to the end of that part of it. I am proud of the way we have served the people of this Hawaii with the concerns expressed, especially of that Kona Board of Realtors gentleman. I asked the community, I asked the council to review our policy, our principles of taxation during the year 2000 to 2008. I think you will see that we cut the taxes, which is, generally speaking, very rarely does the government do that. We did cut the taxes to the people of Hawaii Island during that period. We raised it only once after the tragic event of 9/11, where we did not have enough money to balance the budget of that year. So we had to come before the council to ask for a raise just to balance the budget of a little over $3 million that was short. Other than that, it was ride out the hard times and when was possible to cut the budget, which we did. In regards to this time, this is the third time we've asking you to help us with the budget. I'll make this as simple as can be in a limited time. Me coming back to mayor, as many of you are seated on the council chair, this is your first term. The problems were immense. Most of the community meetings I've had on the requests of communities have been requests for more services, especially that of our police and especially that of the transit system. And that is an ongoing thing as far as because of the kind of society of crime. People are literally afraid to leave their homes, and we know that. And so that is a heavy priority. In regards to the transit system, we come into a picture here a little over a year ago. The new councilmen, people, especially you, are being bombarded with this kind of requests of the problems. This transit system, as I said to you before, was embarrassing. It was ugly. It was disappointing. We will try to fix it. We just hired and got a new administrator that just started last week Friday. The new plan was presented to you. I think it's a good plan, but it's going to take us years to get here. The bottom line is this. It is something that needs to be fixed. It is in shambles in regards to the condition of the buses. Very few buses are in good shape. And there are even buses that should not be run for certain routes. Like I'm sure you see those huge buses that we wish we had smaller buses. This tax system is good for this one reason. It dictates that money shall be spent for transportation. We commit that at least the first half year of it, all of it will go to try to improve the transit system. Another commitment in regards to all of this is a simple fact that without this raise, we have no funds to fix the system. This system must be fixed. The good part of the raising its revenues through this 0.5% is this. At least 30 to 40% of the revenues raised will be paid directly by the tourists. On that, 99% of the funds raised will be spent on this island as I committed. I say again, 99%. I have no other source of funds to do this. Lord knows we don't want to come back to raise up any of property tax, which is so unfair because right now 72 or 73% of our revenues of general fund is raised by property tax because we are so limited in opportunities, authority to do so. The other two is vehicle weight, as you know, and the fuel tax, which you've just raised for the first time in 30 years to try to catch up on some of the roads. I ask that you grant this. I ask that you know the difficulty of what we ask you. This is the one means where we can assure the public that all the money that we raise in this coming half a year of this will be spent on trying to improve the transit system. We have a new administrator. She recruited her from the mainland. A plan that she submitted, I think, is a good one, and we will stick to it. In regards to going back to the gentleman from Kona, I respect everything you said. I do know of distrust of us to expect us to stay within the budget. I am proud of the cuts we have made and will continue to keep our costs down as best as we can, and everyone is welcome to review every dollar of how the money proposed to be spent is spent. I ask you to trust us in regards to this is such a high priority that we increase the quality of our roads, we increase the quality of our transit system, and I commit to you we will do this. Thank you very much for this time.
Thank you, Ms. David. Council members, discussion.
I don't know that we received all the presentation from the finance director and deputy director, so can we proceed to hear what they have to present to us?
Would you like to continue?
So, we actually appreciated all the feedback from each community because each community had a unique perspective and a lot of people had really good ideas. And definitely they know they can continue to email us if they have additional suggestions. We did try to look at the mass transit master plan and the current upcoming year mass transit budget. As the mayor said, we're committed to spending at least that first year since it's only a half year of revenue on mass transit, and it's probably going to pretty much take most of that G tax surcharge to run the transit system. So the sheet of paper that's being passed out that we didn't even have a chance to show the mayor, sorry mayor, is the general excise tax surcharge and mass transit financial plan. And the first column is 2018, and that's the fiscal year we're in right now. And so it shows how much is for salaries and wages, which is primarily our administrative staff and our mechanics. And then OCE, which pays for a lot of the routes. As you reminder, we hire our drivers for the routes. We contract that out. And then paratransit and share ride. But as you might remember, transit is funded by two sources, general fund and highway fund. So you'll see those lines repeated down below as well. and then money for equipment, and then primarily grants. And then the highway fund is primarily spent on driver contracts, paratransit, share ride, and fuel. And so right now, it's just about a 50-50 split, $6.8 million from general fund and $7.2 million from highway fund. For 2019, we know the driver contracts will be going up. They're tied to the UPW rate of pay. So those will be going up no matter what happens. But in addition, they're also, the contracts are ending, I believe, at the end of May. So they'll be going out for bid again as well. So the numbers changed somewhat. Some of the costs were actually shifted to the highway fund since with the fuel tax increase. So if nothing happens with the GE surcharge, then this is probably what the proposed budget will be when we submit it on March 1st. However, when we looked at the mass transit plan, there's various pieces of operations in there. And for 2019, there's some proposed new routes, which you see on the OCE line, and definitely some new buses to make the system work better. And then in addition, applying for an additional grant. Down below, you'll see we added a new line, capital improvements. They have some things that are more, whether it's park and rides or transit centers or different things, or even just improving the information. Those are listed under the capital improvements. And then we also have a line for accelerated improvements if we feel like there's additional funds that might be able to be associated with that. So maybe we can build out a center faster or actually get the IT information, the data out there to people quicker. So with that, even if putting all of the $12 million from the GE surcharge in the first half year, we would still need the same amount of $7.2 million from the highway fund, and it could reduce the general fund down by $2.6 million or so. That's like one option. The funding sources could be, changed, but the GE tax is committed, for the transit system. So the mass transit plan, I think, is not in its final state yet. I think there's still community meetings going on, and it should be finalized by the end of the fiscal year. But it's a plan that, would get us to where our transit system should be, so that people can rely on it and they can utilize it on a daily basis, especially to go to work. The following year, we went with what the department is, kind of estimating costs would be at this time. But, until we actually bid out the new driver contract, we won't have any official numbers. And so it's like a best estimate. So it continues to increase slightly, primarily for expected wage increases. But then in addition, I believe additional routes are added on. More buses are purchased, and they will continue to apply for additional grant opportunities. And then from 2020 and out, I think is when the capital improvements in the plan start to get larger. I think there's more build out going on, as well as buses as well. So in that, by the time we get to 2020, it is possible that the whole $25 million could be spent just on transit alone if we didn't use fuel tax or general fund. Part of the mayor's plan would be that GE tax would be used for the transit system, which would free up fuel tax so that more roads could be done on a probably more timely basis. Some of the projects that are awaiting funding, when we did the fuel tax increase, it's really to help catch up on a lot of the district road paving, but there's some big projects that we are concerned about STIP. When the president submitted his budget, instead of having a 80% federal grant opportunity for highways and roads and 20% matched by the counties, it flipped it and it passed the burden down to the states and the counties so that the federal government would provide 20% and the states and counties would provide 80% of the road money. Obviously, that still has to go through Congress. This isn't a done deal, but it kind of shows where they're thinking and that there'll probably be a decrease in federal projects. Right now, it takes us, 2 to 3 to 4 years of STIP money to accumulate it to be able to do one big project. And so the GE tax, if there's any extra, would allow us to do additional projects as well. Whether it's the extension of Ani Keoho Kalole down to Kaiminani, whether it's just improving Henry Street, or Kuakini Phase 2, or fixing up Wainuinui Avenue. And when we list these projects and these dollar amounts, this is like a total reconstruction where they're going in, digging it out, relaying the pipes and things like that. It's not just going in and resurfacing. However, that's, like from Public Works and some of the projects they know are on their list. But what we did hear loud and clear is that each community has priority projects as well. And, in Pahoa, it was that they definitely need sidewalks or some kind of shoulder. It's not safe. They have no place to walk there. I'm always, paying attention when I'm driving down that road because, I don't want to hit anyone. And I do see a lot of, moms with strollers and different things as well. In Waikoloa, they were concerned that, there's really one main road in and one main road out. And, they want an additional road. We do have the emergency road, but, that's, I think, not opened on a regular basis. Definitely restriping Kahakai Boulevard. Some of the requests were not big. It was actually just getting the lines on it so they can see at night so they're not crossing the center line. And so we definitely heard all of those comments. South Kona paving, I felt bad when I was at Yano Hall that I didn't know they were going to be paving in front of Yano Hall very soon, but that is on the list. So we just wanted the community to know we definitely heard it. We're talking to Public Works. We haven't had a chance to, sit down with each department and work out, all through all of the requests, but we know there's a high need. So whether it's fuel tax being freed up or additional GE tax that gets generated, there's plenty of projects to get done. So it really comes down to how quickly we want to see it happen. If we're happy with the bus system in its current state, then that's what's going to happen. We might be able to afford to replace 1 or 2 buses a year, especially since one of the good things about the transit plan and just hearing from the community is that we do know our buses are not sized right for our routes, so that, we do want to get smaller buses for smaller ridership routes or smaller areas or narrower roads. So that is one of the things we want to do, but it will take us a lot longer to get there. And, I think for a lot of people, they need the bus to be able to get to work on time. I've heard of people who have lost jobs because they couldn't get there, on a timely basis. So this is one proposal. We're not saying, it's the final plan. It can't be tweaked, but we tried hard to try to identify what was in the plan that wasn't already in the budget and the additional amounts it would take. So in the first year, it would take, between $5.5 to $7.5 million to start to implement the plan. And then in the next year, between about $6 to $8 million, depending if we want to try and accelerate some of those things. We're trying to make it match, the GET estimates, but it doesn't mean it has to be used that way. So we're happy to answer any questions. We know even the community was looking forward to seeing a plan. We talked to Transit a little bit about it. They're in the process of moving to their new Transit base yard. So even though we met the new administrator, she's aware of the plan. We weren't able to have maybe as a detailed and thorough and conversation with her as we had hoped, but she's still getting to know the mechanics, know the buses, know the shape they're in. Obviously she got caught on to that rather quickly, but she needs to be able to tell us which ones can actually be repaired and which ones definitely need to be replaced.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. Deputy Director, do you have anything to add? No, not at this time. Okay. I really appreciate, it's hard because we're scrambling. The timeline on this has been very, very short, and there's still so many unknowns. So thank you for giving us an idea of how the additional revenues would be allocated. There's, at this point, so much that we don't know. We don't have the mayor's budget in front of us. Even the first draft of the budget isn't due until next month, so we don't have that information to begin to see what is going to happen if we don't have additional revenues. Additionally, it's premature for us to be making decisions while the legislature is still in session. We know there are bills still alive that could alter the allocation of TAT, the transient accommodation tax, to the various counties. We don't know if they will pass. Sometimes bills go right up to the last 11th and a half hour and die. Our legislature has a reputation of passing something like 5% of the bills that are introduced. So we have to wait and see to get that information. But the even bigger picture, and I'm kind of, we've taken this item out of order, is the resolution 488-18, which was put forth by Ms. David to ask the legislature to extend time to adopt this surcharge. I was kind of confused by that at our first hearing because it seemed a bit out of sync with the votes from many of the council members. But I can tell you this, that bill has changed, as bills do as they move through the legislature. And it's going to change the whole landscape of this decision, meaning if that bill does move forward, we have greater latitude in how we can expend these additional revenues, and that changes the decision making. We won't know, once again, we won't know until the legislature closes whether that extension's been granted. And this puts us in something of a pickle because right now, if we don't pass this GE tax extension by March 31, as the legislature has enacted to date, we will not have the opportunity to reconsider it. And if we were to put it up to vote today, I'm pretty certain, given the votes that came through the council at committee, that it would be voted down. We would not be able to revive it if things change at the state legislature. So I'm moving to postpone Bill 102 Draft 2 until May 9th, 2018. That's our council meeting in Hilo. The legislature closes, I believe, on May 2nd. We will have the mayor's second budget by May 5th. We will have a lot more information. And as Ms. Leloy likes to say, it takes good information to make good decisions. So that's my motion. And
Okay. There's been a motion to postpone made by Ms. O'Hara, seconded by Ms. Leloy. Discussion, council members?
Yeah.
Ms. Poindexter?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not supporting the postponement at this time. I feel that we all, each as council members, have something to say, especially when the mayor and his cabinet came out to our communities. And I think others have the right to hear from us as their council representatives right now. So I am not in favor of a postponement. I may be in favor of it once everyone has an opportunity to speak. But right now, it's not.
I'm going to check with Ms. O'Hara and see if she wants to hold off on making that motion to give council members a chance to speak. Ms. O'Hara?
Oh, I would absolutely want council members to speak. It's
So
just,
you'd have to withdraw
difficult
your
procedure.
motion to postpone.
Well, okay, now you know where it's going. I'm happy to withdraw.
Okay, so that motion's been withdrawn, and we're going to continue speaking on Bill 102 at this time. Did you want to speak, Ms. Poindexter? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. The GT increase, we heard a testifier say it's a safety net. It is not a safety net. We heard from Hope Services a few weeks ago how the increase of homelessness in that Kupuna population. This, I've heard from one of the members of the community at our meeting, Deanna, that you were at, that said, my pockets are empty. My retirement is very, very little. You drop a penny on the ground, people are going to start diving for that penny. This is the straw that could break the camel's back for our poor population and our elderly population, throwing them into homelessness. We already see an increase in homelessness in that population. So, and we heard from Nelson Hirano this morning that, we need to look at enforcing the existing taxes. I totally agree with him. I also heard him say that, there's a goose that is laying the golden egg, and that's the Airbnb, which we need to go after. We all know that. TAT and so on. So people are looking at the meeting, my community meeting, there was one person that said they supported it. The rest were looking for other resources that could help, other solutions besides raising the GT. And I've heard from more people who are against the GT than who are for the GT. So one thing that bothered me last night is I got a call from a constituent and said that Representative Mark Nakashima had put a House bill through to exempt Huhonua from paying their GET taxes for 7 years. So I went digging, and what I found was there is a House bill out there that's amending the enterprise zone. And if everybody knows, or a lot of us were here when we talked about the enterprise zone, which I was real leery on voting on increasing the zones because it was real limited on who would get that tax benefit of exempting them from paying GET taxes. You know, here we are, the state is looking to help these bigger corporations who could probably afford to pay it, looking to help them to exempt it and making it a priority to do it. So I'm saying I am in support of extending it until I can see the state move on exempting our food and our health care. If they can move fast enough to try and help bigger corporations to help them with exemptions on GET, then they should be looking at ways to exempt it for the population that it's affecting, the poor, the disabled, and the elderly. Those are the types of exemptions that I've heard many people say, if those were exempted, I would go for it. You know, but right now it's not helping us out. So I know the state can do that, and I know they have a bill in there to exempt it, extend the time frame. And that's why at the last committee meeting, I fully supported Council Member Miley David's resolution to encourage the state to go and extend that time frame. It'll give us time to review the budget, see what's there. The state now has the numbers from our tourism that we just got the numbers from the tourism, the increases.
Really helpful.
So I think now the state will say, hey, we got that much more money. We can give the counties back more money. You know, so that's going to be helpful as well. But we're not going to know until the state legislature acts on certain things that we need them to act on before we can make a decision. So if I was forced to make a decision today, it's no. I will not vote to increase it. And I think the mayor would agree with that. And I think he would support the decisions that we would make in that direction as well. Did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, yes, I did forget to mention that one of the things that was common through most districts was that if food and medication were exempted, that it would definitely be a lot more palatable. And our only comment or response to that was that we couldn't control that within our county. It has to be a statewide thing. So, or at least the bill that we were given, the act that we have to work off of, doesn't give us that opportunity to make our own exemptions because the state tax office has to be able to make it work statewide. And so, but definitely that's one of the things. And yes, and I'm not saying we didn't hear those same comments from other people. It's just we have a very diverse island is definitely one of the recurring themes. But we definitely heard what a lot of people had to say. And it's definitely the people who are transportation challenged that are probably most in favor of this.
Right. So at the state level, if I'm not mistaken, I did see something floating around about exempting, the possibility of exempting healthcare and food costs. So I'm going to go and try to find that.
Yeah, if you could, because we were rather busy this last week going crisscrossing the island. I mean, I enjoyed it, don't get me wrong. But I haven't been able to keep up on the changes in the legislature. And I know some bills definitely are changing quickly, how they tend to gut one, add things. Right. So if we could all get together on those same bills, that would probably be really helpful.
And so I'd like to publicly say and even ask all of you to call the state legislators and ask them to expedite something like that with the exemptions. Because if they're working hard to exempt big corporations from exempting them from paying the GET and not deal with the people, that's totally unfair. I was I felt insulted when I was finding out the information this morning on, who's getting exempted. Big Island Dairy, they're all in the enterprise zones. And these are people making big bucks coming from the mainland. And so I'm insulted by that. So I'll yield at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Poindexter. Council members, anyone wish to speak?
I'm a little cautious because that audit coming back may really shift what is actually a priority. And besides this mass transit master plan, which is amazing, we still don't have a grip on the revenues that we can generate from the fares, and we cannot get to an unduplicated number of riders. So when I attended the meeting, there was questions asked about what is the bus ridership. And it was just kind of an equation of, well, we generate $800,000, so we have 800,000 riders, and that is completely inaccurate.
Right. So, I mean, in terms of bus trips, yes, we have roughly 700,000 or 800,000. But in terms of individual unique riders, and so right now we don't have a mechanism to capture that data, unfortunately. We could tell you which routes have how many riders on any given day, but we can't say it's the same people who are relying on it. Because, in the master plan, I noticed there's like van pool, there's other options, right? So once we know who the riders are, so I think if we had some kind of, we do have like a pass or a ticket system you can buy, we know who those people are, but on a regular day, we don't know if it's visitors, we don't know if it's residents, we don't know if it's people commuting to work, we have a rough estimate of how many are students, but I know sometimes it's hard to tell. So definitely, right, the priorities might change. And one of the things in the community is because people do have different experiences, is a lot of people talked about having, I want to say it was a regional or zone type of system, so that, if you're just going down the street, you don't pay the same fare as if you're going across the island. And so we know that's been an issue. We just haven't had a good way to track it. So as part of a whole new fee collection system, I think that would be part of it. We just met with the transit administrator last week, Wednesday, and I think she needs at least a couple weeks to get her feet wet and figure out, where we're at and what would be the best system. We have asked her for estimates because it's not just the system itself, but, in each bus and then on the buses that right now that we're renting, something that would work there as well. So we're definitely looking at what all the opportunities are, because we do know that the cash collection is one of the situations. We're trying to help them, with intermediary controls right now, things, stopgap measures to make it better. And so our controller is working with that, but we definitely know we need a bigger system long term, and so hopefully between now and the May budget we'll have a better idea, because unfortunately right now I can't tell you if it's 20,000 per bus or 20,000 for the whole system, or so we just need a chance to look at those estimates a little bit more. One of the good things too is that I guess in other states they really piggyback with other counties, and why we try to do that on a lot of things. She definitely wants to do that. So if a system's working in one county, we might as well try and utilize that as well. We're good about taking hand-me-downs from other counties.
Is the mayor still in our Hilo chambers?
No, he's not.
I think he did have a meeting this morning. He might be free later, but I think he probably ran up for his meeting.
I just want to take the opportunity to share what my optics were as far as the community meetings that I attended or heard from. And actually, my community was kind of all over the place. I had some people saying, well, why don't we, if that half a penny can get us 25 million, why don't we do 2 pennies? And then I had the extreme opposite, which is no. We're on fixed income, absolutely no. But I come with a little baggage. And I had the opportunity to work for a previous administration under Steve Yamashiro. And I think Mr. Lopez and Mr. Henderson is going to appreciate this baggage that I bring. Back in 2000, when Mayor Yamashiro handed the keys over to Mayor Kim, he left Mayor Kim a $13 million fund balance. And he asked, one request Mr. Yamashiro said is, please close the landfill. And at that time, Gerald Sumata, who was our deputy chief engineer, said, okay, yeah, it's going to cost about $6 to $9 million. Recently, we floated a bond for $40 million to close the landfill. So when we talk about trust and we talk about action speaking louder than words, there is a community out there that really just does not trust that the mayor is going to do what he says he's going to do. Then the question came up of how did we get here? And one of the reasons is because of our bargaining unit increases. And so I had to reflect back a little bit again. And with that baggage that I bring, recognize that between 2000 and 2008, Mayor Kim hired 442 new employees. So we're here because of the seeds that Mayor Kim sowed. And so when we're asked to be put in this tough position, I'm only gleaning from past experiences on what happened. And that, Mr. Henderson and Mr. Lopez, is the baggage that I bring and what I'm offering to this body so that we can make a difference. That's where I'm at right now. I know it seems like the plan is not ripe. There's other moving pieces. I just wanted to share that. Thank you for sitting in, Mayor. That's what I heard. I just wanted to share that with my colleagues because we all attended our own meetings. So, I'm just offering that as food for thought right now. Thank you.
Ms. O'Hara? Okay, excuse me one second. I cannot see Mr. Chung, so Mr. Chung, you may have to, if you're there, you may have to speak up to get my attention. Okay, there we go. I can see you now.
Economies are not static. And in 2000, when Mr. Clinton left office, President Clinton left office, that was the last time the U.S. ran a surplus. Okay, so that rolled over all the way down to here. And the surplus that Mr. Yamashiro left in terms of the exceptionally large fund balance, which is beneficial to the county in terms of bond ratings and other things, was not depleted during Mr. Kim's initial term, but it was not managed in a way that I would have been comfortable with. Yes, we added 400 employees in the 8 years between his first election in 2000 and 2008. But we were far behind. Something people seem to not bring into this picture is the increase in population on this island. We have explosive growth. I recently read a opinion provided by the chair of the Chamber of Commerce in Hilo, where it said we did not have explosive growth. Well, currently growth nationally is less than 1%, and yet we've been averaging 2% per year since 2000, 36% growth. And in my district of Puna, it's doubled that. That district has quadrupled since I moved there in 1980. There were 1,100 and 750 individuals. There are now 50,000 individuals. So it's unrealistic to expect the government's not going to grow when the population base that you're serving is growing. You look over at Maui, they experienced their exponential, well, all growth of population is exponential, but they experienced their high growth between the years of 1980 to 2000. And it peaked between 1990 and 95. They had annual growth rates of 3%. Puna surpasses even that, but that's what was happening on Maui. And they now have a population of 165,000, not counting visitor count. And they run, their budget this past year was $705 million. Here we are on Big Island, much larger landmass, much more highway to maintain, much more services to provide. We have 200,000 people on the island today. And our budget last year was $491 million. In real terms, because we had a price index of increase of 46% between 2000 and 2018, that means that the 2000 budget of 175 million would be 250 million in today's dollars. Our budget has doubled in 18 years. Our population has grown 36%. This is not out of line. We have to provide services. And when I hear the argument that this is going to harm the poorest of the poor, I need to reflect on that, because the gains that we would make by passing the GE tax would allow us to provide services to the poorest of the poor.
Okay. Mr. Chung?
Yeah.
Would you like the floor?
Thank you. I don't have any questions of the mayor. I just have some comments about this bill in general. As all of you know, I supported it, and I continue to support it. I went to a public hearing at Yano Hall, the first one that was set up by the administration, and also attended the one that was in Hilo. And at the Yano Hall meeting, I was asked this question of one of the attendees, whether if I went back to Hilo and my constituents voiced their opposition against this bill, would I still continue to support it? And I told that person that if I believed that it was in the best interest of this county for me to vote yes, I would continue voting yes, even at the risk of my political career. And I still feel strongly about it. I'm not trying to, discredit any person who feels differently from me, because let's look at some of the common themes here that members of the council have, even regardless of our position. We're concerned for poor people, right? Those voting in favor of it believe that this proactive measure will allow us to help improve our transportation system, our mass transit system, as well as our roadways. And this, I think, will have a direct benefit on the poor population, particularly in the rural areas, not so much in the urban areas, but in the rural areas. But on the other side, people are worried that people are living paycheck to paycheck, and the poorest of the poor will be affected by this, and I certainly understand that. So we have that as a common denominator. We all are concerned about the plight of the poor population on this island. Another pervading theme that I heard from these at these public hearings was that, and this probably is more telling, people don't trust the way that government is going to spend their money. And that's not an indictment against just the administration. It's an indictment against all of us, because we are, after all, the people who make the decisions in government. And we have to, I guess, consider that. Whether we vote yes or no, people feel that way about us. My yes vote in this is a show of confidence that I believe we can use the added monies responsibly. I think there are ways that we can do that. We can also cut some areas, and if this measure is ultimately voted down, we're going to have to really, really tighten our belts and do some things that we wouldn't normally want to do. but it could be a combination of both. What I'm worried about is, and this gets to something that Miss Ruggles had talked about. It's the luxury tax. I call it the luxury tax. It's the surcharge or extra charges on second homes worth over $2 million. It's not a novel idea. I know Miss Ruggles brought it up the last time, but as Miss Leloy pointed out, she has something drafted up already. And during the last term, I know Mr. Gregor Iligan, brought up that possibility, and that was echoed by Miss Ruggles' predecessor, Mr. Paleka. And at the time, I said, and this was again about 2 years ago, that I would support such a measure so long as that appeal that's going through with city and counties bill is sustained in their favor. We cannot rely on something without knowing its legality. It would be disastrous for us to rely on something like that. But it's not a novel idea, and as I said, it's something that's been tossed around for a while, and it's something that I'd be willing to look at. I wanted to point out something, because we didn't take the resolution up first, which extended the GET deadline. I think as proposed, it was to September, but I wanted to point out something. If you guys look at the communication that I had submitted to amend Ms. David's resolution 48818, I just want everyone to bear in mind that the Senate Transportation Committee last week, Tuesday, I think, amended that bill, Senate Bill 3088, into a draft 1. And what it now provides for is they moved that, they changed the deadline from March 31 to June 30th, not all the way to September. Now, this is, I think, intended to coincide with our budget process, but it still addresses some of the concerns that were brought up by various council members. It also provides that no less than 60% of the surcharges received shall be used for operating or capital costs of public transportation within each county. Now, what that does is it frees up, it has the potential for freeing up about 40% of the revenues generated for other uses. Now, that would address some of the concerns that Mayor Kim brought up about the inflexibility of the uses of these revenues. And of course, no less than 60, so it could be more than that devoted to transportation. And then the last one, and this is kind of poorly worded, but something that they can still work with, I think. But the intent is that 2% of the surcharges received may be used on roadways used by the general public. And basically, they didn't want to use the word private roads, but that's what it means. So out of that total revenues generated, there is the possibility that 2% of those revenues could be used for private roads. I'm going to use that term, private roads. And that kind of provision will actually help. Well, it's going to help my district because I have Chong Street, but that's just about one road. But think what it can do for other rural areas. And what it indicates to me is that the Senate, at least, and I credit Senator Lorraine Inouye in that regard, they were listening to our concerns. And I know Ms. Leloy was up there last week or just recently, and then I know she did her lobbying, so she may have pulled off some magic in getting these things done too. So, I want everybody to at least bear in mind that we have this still floating around, and it's heading for the WHAM committee pretty soon. Now, there's been talk about why can't we exempt food and drugs? Well, there's still a possibility. I think I brought that up the last time. If we pass this now, we're in a leveraged position to now go to the legislature and ask them to further exempt food and drugs in certain, well, maybe, I'd be hard pressed to actually try to exempt food, but at least prescription medications. But whatever. The reason why they couldn't do it this term is because it would have had to go to too many committees. Yeah, and that would have been problematic for them from a timing standpoint. And now this still has to go to WAM and get approved there, and it might have to it still has to cross over to the House, and we don't know what's going to happen there. But I think it's a good starting point. But having said all that, we talked about this issue ad nauseum the last time, and I don't really want to belabor the point. I just wanted to bring up new information, and I really believe that this is something that can help the county. It's not merely for the purpose of balancing the budget, okay? But the fact that it can free up $8 million that's right now being used to subsidize the mass transit system would have a huge impact on our budget. I also want to say that I talked to Finance Director Deanna Sacco, but she's been so tied up in all of these meetings that were held at the behest of the county council members, I want to point out. I asked her if she could prepare a bill for me, and this is much in advance of the administration even submitting their first budget, but it's to address real property tax rates. And specifically, and the reason why I asked her to do it instead of my staff is they have the template already. And it was merely to reduce the taxes, the tax rate for the residential class, because I really believe they got unfairly hit the last time. And that has a cumulative negative effect on our housing market, in my opinion. So I wanted to reduce that, and probably I'm still going to support a reduction of that even if the GET bill doesn't pass. So we're looking at a further shortfall, budget shortfall this year, if that's passed. But I just think we unfairly hit the residential class too hard the last time. But that just demonstrates what I had said earlier about us trying to diversify our revenue stream. We cannot rely solely on real property taxes. At some point, something is going to give, and it's going to be really, really bad. So if we can do it with a mixture of GET and real property taxes, and perhaps some other things that may come down along the way, then we're going to be good. And we don't have to go to the legislature too much. We don't have to worry about the TAT too much. I mean, anything that comes in our way is going to be gravy. But, anything I say after this is going to be reiterating what I said over the last several weeks. So thank you very much.
I find myself in a weird situation that I am prepared to actually support this to make it to second reading, and fully prepared to vote against it in second reading, just to make sure that we keep the timelines in place. But all the arguments on both sides are very, very valid. And I am not of the mindset that we adjust our income stream to address our costs. We adjust our costs to meet our income streams. And which brings back up the conversations we had previously about the budget and the budget hearings and an ad hoc committee. I am keen on that because I think we can do some good work for the county. So with that, we're faced with a very interesting situation going forward. And like I said, my intentions, depending on what we decide to do, is to make sure this conversation doesn't end today, but I'm not sure I can support it going forward unless we have some other concessions. So with that, I will yield at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Richards.
And really, they're just tired. They're tired of what's been going on with the increases to everything. It's not fun trying to explain to them that the roads aren't being paved or the parks haven't been properly maintained, and in the meantime we're still trying to increase these taxes to generate the revenues to do these things. It's really difficult to explain to a lot of them that this is a situation that we're currently in. So, I appreciate all the efforts by our legislators from Hawaii Island trying to figure out a solution to help us or put us in a positive direction towards the GET. But and I appreciate that, but I don't know what's going to happen with those bills. All those those bills that Senator Inouye is championing. It goes to the House, and who knows what could happen. But I'm okay with waiting to see if there is some positive news that comes from the legislative priorities of our senators and reps. And recently, out of all the comments, Ms. O'Hara, was thinking about postponing it. I'd love to see what could happen. It's just really hard to contemplate the what ifs. We pass this, what if? What if they do that? What if they pass that? I have no idea and could never understand the intricacies of this year's legislature. But, I'd be happy to support a postponement. But if we were going to vote on this today, it'd be no, to be honest. My community told me loud and clear that they don't want to see this pass. So I have to listen to, their wants and needs. And sure, we have members from the Carpenters Union, members from PATH that, they can see a way of this money helping the bike routes, the safer pathways to our different communities. I understand. But I also am listening to everybody else that are saying we gotta live within our means. Our budget is ballooning by every year, and it we see these massive projects. Ane Keokalole Phase 3, desperate, needed $50 million. Huakini Phase 2, desperately needed $50 million. Ali'i Highway, that's off the books now, or still on the books, but off the books, $50 million. These are desperately needed projects within, I'm just only saying it, within Kona, which in the district that I and Karen represent.
Thank you. My position, I'm also hearing my constituents loud and clear that they do not want this increase. I just wanted to state that while we were talking, I did some quick calculations, and because we talk about the GE tax as if it's going to put more of the burden on the tourism industry. But if we want to put more of the burden on the tourism industry, we would raise the hotel and resort rates.
We have cut. We're going to try to continue cut without hurting services. We know the tremendous backlog on roads. I thank the council for having to step forward in regards to a very difficult time.